streaming and radio kind of being the first topic, which is one that everybody likes to talk about in the industry. And really want to ask you, what are the smartest strategies for independent artists to stand out on DSPs today, given how saturated streaming has become?
It's a tough one. I think that I think one of the glaring issues right now, right, is the idea of how much music is being uploaded onto Spotify every single day, and how the rate at which that is increased. I think the last number from like 2023 was 120,000. From 2021, it was 90,000, and it continues to go up. So that saturation is a very real thing when you are trying to look at streaming as an entire landscape. But I think that that's where there's a bit of a flaw in thinking for a lot of folks in trying to compete with everyone. And I think that's what it is to me is finding, let's say, anywhere from, it doesn't matter what size you are, 30,000 monthly listeners, 300,000 monthly listeners, finding a loyal and reliable fan base to work from, and then everything else you can build off of. I think that when you're trying to strategize around outside forces, whether it be independent playlist or, a viral moment happening or, editorial from a platform, if you're starting from that without approaching your own fan base and having a reliable place to lean on, then you're putting the cart before the horse. I think that if you get that strong, loyal, and doesn't matter how niche it is fan base, you can build from there rather than trying to go the other direction.
I
Yeah,
think that
oftentimes. Oh, go ahead, Raina.
I think that a lot of artists put the playlist ahead of the fans, and the thought is like, if I get the playlist, then I'm going to get fans, which
Yeah.
could not be further from the truth. As an artist, I think it's important. Like, the playlisting is the reward for a job well done. It's not the goal. The goal is to sell tickets to a show so that you can sell merch, so you can make real money, so you can afford to live, because streaming doesn't pay nearly as much as touring does. But I think people really lose sight of the whole ecosystem because of the focus we've put on playlists and on streaming success. Go ahead, Dustin. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that was what I was gonna say. I was just talking to an artist who the first song that they released ever, they got on New Country, and they were ecstatic, and it was super exciting. And I'm like, hey, just FYI, you're gonna come off this playlist, and hopefully we'll get moved. That's the goal, is that you push the streams there, listeners there, and you get moved to something else. And I was like, but don't expect people to come out of the woodworks and save your song and re-listen. Like, this is their first touch point, and that's really what it boils down to. And even worse, you can't retarget them, really, maybe through marquee ads or something, but for the most part it's kind of dead end marketing. To me, it is a symptom of success, not the first step into creating a fandom.
Totally. Yeah, I think that it's the way that we often describe it is you need that foundational fan base, and things like Editorial, or let's say just in the dance music space with Apple Music being able to do DJ mixes for Apple, those are all things that help fan the flame and ideally build that fan base from its core into those outer edges and continue to expand, and especially build that inner core of your fan base from what you've already established. But if you're relying on that at the get-go, it's moving targets that are nearly impossible to catch.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of build a sonic and a visual brand identity that people can connect with. I think there might be a misconception that you need 30 million fans to have a successful career, because you really don't. You can sell tickets, you can sell merch, sell vinyls, whatever you want, if you just have a really strong fan base of a tight little group of super fans who will be there for you when you need them to be.
There are so many artists on Spotify and elsewhere that I will not name, but you look at the monthly listener count, it's like, oh my God, like, this person's got to be a global phenomenon. And if you have access to the back end, it's like, well, how many of those are actually active listeners, right? How many of those are truly going to go out and, like you were saying here, buy your tickets? How many of them are going to go and pre-save your album on Countdown? So many of it is just like people passing through, and that's not a sustainable model.
Which is funny, because it was like that in country for a long time too. I mean, it still is in a lot of ways, but country always went after the radio, and you would have these radio hits, and then they can't sell any tickets, and that's always been a thing. That's funny in country. But yeah, I still talk to artists where I'm running ads, let's say, to streaming, And I'm like, hey, let's run some ads to merch. And they're like, yeah, but what about the streaming? And I'm like, you have a fan base. Do you want to make some money? And they're like, well, that's
Yeah.
what the streaming's for. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
let's sell some merchandise. Let's actually make money. I am sort of curious on, just to follow up on James's question, the rest of the panel, because I always try to think about, if I'm an artist watching this, it's like, okay, fine, playlists aren't that great, but how do I like pitch? How do I at least give myself a leg up? Because why not? And I'm kind of curious
Yeah.
what you guys do on that end.
I can if you want. Sorry.
Sure.
So I think that like one of the things that's so key there is coming back to what we're talking about is like if you're showing a proven loyal fan base, you're showing proven loyal users of a platform that are driving to that platform speaking to listen to your music. If you're able to express that in your pitch, that is going to be way better than any window dressing of like, this song is sick and it's a banger. Da, 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 da. At the end of the day, every single streaming platform's core goal is platform retention. If you can prove that with your fan base in pitching, and then you just kind of think from that while you're pitching and how you can expand and maybe give it some color if you want, that should be your starting.
Well, and you have to think about it like a real estate transaction. I mean, they have real estate we want. In the old days of retail, you could do price and positioning. You could pay for the end cap. You could pay for that placement. You're paying as an artist, you're paying for that placement by bringing people to the party. And that's what they're looking at in those analytics when they look, trying to see what kind of followership you have and what kind of engagement you have. The engagement you have on Instagram is going to affect what's happening on Spotify, because your call to action on Instagram is going to affect that. And so I think a lot of people think really myopically about Spotify has become the scoreboard for the industry. Everybody wants to get their numbers up and all this, but all of these things are intertwined. And I think the question Dustin asked was, what can you do to heighten your chances? And I think, in all honesty, Connor, I think you're absolutely right. But I also think giving yourself ample lead time, building a solid marketing plan around every single
100%, yeah.
that's bespoke to the single, and then delivering those marketing drivers to the DSP, whether it be through Spotify for Artists or whether, like symphonic artists, we pitch, delivering the metadata to us and the marketing drivers to us, so we can go do our best work, or so that Dustin can do his best work. Your outside hires, I think, is really important.
Like 2-3 days you need, right?
That gives me
Yeah.
an ulcer.
Ian, I wanted to make sure and come back if you had something to add there, or just what's your perspective on this, from Hopeless, from your experience there.
I'd agree largely with this group that it's at this point really about meaning something to your fan base and all that, especially at the independent level starting out. Editorial's driving less than ever. I wouldn't count on something like that making you a career. That's really something from, like almost 10 years ago at this point. Not unimportant, but we're not seeing that as something that makes a career. I would say, to put a little bit finer point on some of the stuff that was said, mean something in your genre and focus on momentum versus size. Like, there's, outside of maybe contemporary country and pop and a few other areas, there's no killer playlist that really change the game for you. I mean, we have artists on Marrow, which is the top Spotify rock playlist, and we're grateful for that. But the career is largely the same the next day, and it's just another piece of the puzzle marching upwards. And we're grateful to have that. That's a larger level get, but even then, it's not changing our situation dramatically. So, you really can't even control this so much at your level with what you're doing. So focus on the best practices. They matter more than you could ever imagine. The lead time, filling out all the stuff, like everyone else said, have a case for why you matter. They're looking to put artists on playlists that matter. And even if you get a favor and get put on a playlist by some chance, the data drives this so much now that you're going to be kicked off the playlist within a day or two if it's not performing. So this really does you no good. Focus on fans and best practices, and the streaming, that's just a reflection of your popularity. It'll largely take care of itself until you're at a later level where I think, label style promotion would really benefit you.
You said something there that I kind of want to get everybody's take on. So many artists, getting on a playlist, they feel like that's the moment that's going to change everything. But not just a playlist, signing a label deal, getting on this tour. I think a lot of artists have this mindset that there's this one magic bullet that's going to change everything. But my experience for 20 years is like it's the accumulation of so many small moments. What are some of your thoughts on that, or conversations you have with your clients or artists or colleagues?
I don't think there's any one moment like signing to a label, getting a playlist, like that grind doesn't stop and it can't ever stop. If you ever get just, I would encourage people not to get comfortable and not to get complacent because really the long haul, I think, is where the success is at.
Well, it's such a recipe for artists to be unhappy because I think, I mean, I was a previous artist and I used to think that like you're kind of working towards some big moment and then there is no such thing. So you're generally unhappy all of the time when really you're just a business that opens every day and you go to work and you go home and, that's the job. And there's ebbs and flows and moments of magic and moments of like depression. I mean, it's just a business. And so the real question is, are you sustainable? Are you happy? Are you working all the time or are you able to rest? And so you need to frame your career in that way.
Well, and the question of, do you want to have to put a suit and tie on to go to work and make a living, or do you want to keep doing what you're doing? The Deftones just released a record. The Deftones have been around forever. It's fucking incredible. Unabashed fanboy. But the Deftones just released a record. I wasn't even aware. My daughter tells me, 15-year-old daughter tells me.
Dude, the
She's
kids
listening
like
to the
Deftones now. It's crazy.
But think about the career arc the Deftones have had. I mean, they're pushing at least 25 years doing what they're doing, probably more like 30. They keep doing it because A, they enjoy it, but B, because if you let up, that momentum stops and nothing is sustainable forever. There's evergreens, and we all know the evergreens that exist out there, but your chances of being an evergreen are few and far between.
We're seeing this with a lot of our artists too, the ones who've been around 15 plus years having their biggest moments now by far. And the common thread is, one, sticking around that long, but also having a super strong brand. That's something definable that really sums up a genre or time period. All those bands seem to be getting much, much bigger. And the artists who are a little more anonymous from previous eras are, largely being forgotten, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, like one for us is Infected Mushroom. I think that they are a perfect example, similar to Seldor, where it's like, it's not necessarily mainstream dance, right? Neither of them would ever be on like a, hitting the top of the charts in a US dance radio format. But they have both mastered their fan bases and continue to drive new music, interaction with their fans. They're continuing to engage with that fan base to make a really thriving career. We have more Infected Mushroom music coming out this year. I'm super excited about. Shameless plug. But I think that it might be cheesy, but the thing that I kind of approach with this is like a Kaizen method. If anyone here knows that, of just taking big steps and turning them into the smallest of tiniest of steps for artists. So like an example for, a small growing artist is build out some playlists to share their fans of, not just your music, but stuff that has inspired you in your process, right? To me, that's a win for an artist. They may not feel that way because it isn't an outside force that has validated them. But to me, that's a big win heading in the right direction for them having a thriving career in the future.
I'd also add streaming's a lot bigger than just Spotify at this point.
Yeah.
YouTube is, and others, but especially YouTube's a very interesting account where like, especially as a new artist or any artist, but especially new, you really need to define yourself. And Spotify gives you a pretty narrow way to do that. But with YouTube, you can make any kind of content you want. It is on you, but if I were just starting out or in the first phase of my career, I would focus very much on YouTube and creating a definable brand there that's very shareable amongst fans.
Well, and YouTube is the #1 music discovery platform on earth still today.
Yeah, it's amazing. We think it's going to grow quite a bit moving forward.
To kind of people, there's whole countries that use it. I mean, Brazil, that's their search engine. It's
Mhm.